Salutations readers, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nkechi, and for today it is time to give y'all my wrap up for September. So, September. Well, I was saying, like, you know what, September is totally fall. Let's actually finally summer can go away now. I'm totally here for the fall, here for Minnesota autumn. For some reason, the autumn equinox happened where it actually felt like fall, and then afterwards we're starting to feel like this summer. It still feels like summer right now, and I do not appreciate that. I'm literally recording as of September 30th, and it still feels like we're in summer. September, why are you like this? Please, let us have fall. But you know what? It's fine. It's fine. Hopefully the next time we do a wrap up, it actually will be fall. Feel like it. You know what I'm saying? But anyways, that's just it regarding the weather. Let's actually talk about the books. So, for September, I did participate in the Magical Readathon Autumn Equinox. I didn't initially plan to go with the Autumn Equinox, but you know what? Fate said we shall do. Anyways, I do recommend going down to the video description down below where I will link my Minnesota Autumn Diary number 10. It pretty much just talks about everything regarding the Magical Readathon and my calling and all that stuff. So if you want to know about that, it's in the beginning part of that video if you're curious. And also consists of 3 books that I finished in that vlog that I will be kind of going through quite quickly here, since that's already half the books I read this month, because I only read 6 books. Not a lot. It's a little bit more than August, and I really was in a slump in September still, but I think I managed to recover from the slump. So now I'm really in more of the reading mood. So that was actually really exciting, and I did manage to complete my calling, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So let's actually start talking about the stats. So again, I read 6 books in September. I DNF'd 3 books. I'm not going to talk about the DNFs here because September was the end of the third quarter, so I will talk about those DNFs in my quarter 3 DNF wrap up, so I'll look forward to that. Number of pages read, 1,149 pages. Number of hours listened, 29.23 hours. I also have a graphic here from Storygraph. Thank you, Storygraph, for this nice graphic as far as all the stats in my readings and all the things. And my average rating was 4.55 stars. It was a really good reading month, y'all. I did not have anything below 3.5 stars. It was so good. And I'm like, yes, this is what I needed. This is what I needed to revitalize my reading momentum. I just need to find really good books, and I did. I found so many good books. So many. And I also finished more arcs this month as well. So we also got some mini arc reviews here. But anyways, without further ado, let's actually start talking about all the books that I read in September. Now, the first 3 books of the month, I already had a vlog that I just recently posted featuring all 3 of these books, so I'm not going to talk too much about them here. But one of the books I read was Toward Eternity by Anton Her. This was an anticipated release for me, and I rated this book 5 stars. I listened to it via audio. It was really good. Highly recommend. Next up, I also read Amari and the Despicable Wonders, the 3rd book in the Supernatural Investigation series by B.B. Alston. 4.5 stars. This was a hybrid read up until I think a third of the way through the book, and then I just went with the physical book. Highly recommend. Really great installment into this series, and I really am looking forward to book number 4. I don't know when that book is going to come out, but please come soon. I also read My Mechanical Romance by Alexine Farrell-Falmouth. This is actually the same author as Olivia Blake. Olivia Blake's the pen name, and Alexine Farrell-Falmouth is actually her real name, but she writes young adult titles in this pen name, and this was the very first book that actually was traditionally published at all, from this name in Olivia Blake. And I really enjoyed this one. I read this one via audio. 4.5 stars. Really good. Very surprised, actually. And I am very curious and excited now to read the next book, the sophomore novel under this name, 12th Night. So yeah, that's all the books that I read in that vlog. Now for the books I did not read for that vlog, just outside of that. So the next book I read was Rakesfall by Vajra Chandrasekhara. This is his sophomore novel. I did request this from Tor.com, and thankfully I did receive an e-arc. Now this book came out in June, and I didn't start reading it until July. So it took me nearly 2 months to read this e-arc, and that's because this was just a really weird book, but I really enjoyed it in a way, I think. I don't know. My brain is still wrapping around the book itself, but let's briefly talk about what even is about. The synopsis was very vague, and I will give y'all a vague rundown because it is still vague to me even now. The idea is that we're following two characters, or really two souls, that are basically reincarnated throughout time. And it started off with the Sri Lankan Civil War, and then even goes past to the point of when humanity is practically dying out. Yeah. It's a lot. It's a sci-fi read, but there's also some fantastical elements. There's also historical elements. It's also some horror stuff. I think there's some body horror in here. It's a lot, y'all. It truly is a lot. And even though it's not very long, because I did pre-order the audiobook, so I did hybrid read with like the audiobook and the ebook, or my e-arc. And I have to say the audiobook did help with getting my brain to really fall through the story a little bit. I think the narrator did a really good job actually with like the pacing and the cadence of the story itself, because this really is a weird book. It is not for the faint of heart. The Saint of Bright Doors was a book that was a little bit weird, but it still followed the genre conventions of a fantasy book. This does not follow any sort of convention of fantasy, sci-fi, horror, or anything like that. It's definitely strong into sci-fi, but it is really experimental. This is an experimental sci-fi, and it's also an epic sci-fi though, which I don't really read a lot of and not really familiar with. And I wasn't really familiar with as well with like a lot of references from the book, but I did find it to be very interesting. I really did like Raja Chandrasekera's writing, and I also liked on how he talked about a lot of things regarding colonialism and imperialism, war, genocide, but also love as well. It's very interesting. And there's also, I don't know, it has this really interesting feeling of like queerness as well that's a lot more subtle to me. It's more subtle in its queerness, but I truly believe it's there. I just don't know how to really explain this book. You really just have to read it and just be there for the ride. And I did not rate this book because I didn't know how would one rate an experimental novel like this. As far as the enjoyment of it itself, I did enjoy taking my time with this. This is not a story that you want to rush through. Despite how short it is, because I think physically it's about a little bit over 300 pages, and the audiobook's about 9 hours. But y'all, this is not a book that you want to just marathon your way through. This is something you really just need to take your time with. And that's why it took me nearly 2 months to read it, because I did not want to rush it. And I definitely did not want to DNF. I was like, no, I'm too fascinated by this. I was so fascinated by the form and the structure of the story that I was just wondering, like, wait, is this like just interconnected novelettes or something? Because it has like 10 parts, and there's several chapters within each part, but each part here has like a different focus and time and the versions of the same characters that we've been following since the very beginning. It was very interesting. And I don't know, I just really enjoyed the experience of it. If I really were to rate it, I think I would have rated it 5 stars, but I didn't want to rate it because I was like, I don't know if the 5 stars would stick necessarily. But we shall see. I don't know. This is definitely a book that I want to reread in the future, now that I have like a basic understanding of like what even happened in the story. So I don't know. I will just have to say this much. If you are just interested in the story itself, like if you saw the cover, you read the very vague synopsis, and you're like, you know what, I'm just curious, give it a shot. If you end up DNFing it, it is what it is. But I do at least recommend giving this a shot. I'm just curious, actually, to see if anyone else has read this book. Like, if you've read this book, please, let's chat about it in the comments down below. I really want to talk to people who have read this book, because I have no one else to talk to about this book. I don't know anyone who has read this, but I do hope, though, that maybe my thoughts on this book made you curious. But do look up a little bit on the content warnings, though. It still gets graphic and a lot of parts, so fair warning. Then the next book that I read that actually did not fulfill any of the prompts for my calling at all, but I just read it because I was like, well, this is the perfect time to just try and finish reading it, since now I got my reading momentum back. I finished my e-arc of Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White. This is his 3rd novel. This is a young adult queer thriller where we follow a trans boy named Miles Abernathy, and this takes place at the Appalachia. This is pretty much specifically West Virginia, Twist Creek County, and we follow Miles as he pretty much sends an email to his parents saying that he is trans, which I have to say, felt that. But then he also experiences a hate crime because there is this blood feud going on in this county between this family, the Abernathys, and the sheriff, who pretty much is a tyrant and just horrible, despicable. Like, he's pretty much responsible for an accident that took the lives of several people, especially very close people to Miles and like his friend's family, but also the accident that affects his family specifically as well, especially with his father. So yeah, there's a lot of turmoil here, and this is such a timely book as far as reform, thanks to the resource of community. Like, this is a very much like a community driven novel. Like, this is a family novel because the Abernathy family itself, like, as flawed as they are, they do have a presence in this novel. And despite the fact that they have trouble understanding transness and understanding Miles to some extent, they do at least understand that they need to protect Miles, especially when the sheriff is pretty much a tyrant and everyone's afraid of the sheriff because he just has all that power. And one thing led to another. Someone was murdered, and we were like, you know what? If one person gets murdered and they were pretty much very close to the sheriff, why not try to go after the rest? So there's a little bit of revenge here as well, but I really like the way that Andrew Joseph White went about that kind of plot line and where that went. But this is still, though, a very intense graphic thriller, though. Not like a horror, but it's still intense. And he does provide a little bit of some content warnings as well through the author's note. Truly appreciate, but there is definitely body horror, murder, child death, fire injury. Like, someone literally was like burnt and they had sustained a lot of injuries. There is also transphobia as well, like dead naming, outing, misgendering, graphic violence, like death, murder, gore, blood, guns. There's also police violence as well. And there's also opioid use and withdrawal as well. Please take care of yourself if that's triggering content for you. There's animal death. Granted, though, I will say this. There is animal death, but it's not this dog here. This dog does not die. I will spoil that for you at least. This dog does not die. Just want to let y'all know. Different animal dies. And it's also very gruesome. There is also internalized ableism as well because, again, just like with the other protagonists that Andrew Joseph White writes, all of his protagonists are also autistic, so we also deal with some internalized ableism. We also have underage drinking. There was a car accident in like the past. Medical content, some vomit as well. So, yeah. Again, do take care if this is a bit much for you, but if you can handle all of those themes and the content warnings, then I highly recommend reading everything that Andrew Joseph White writes, and especially though Compound Fracture. This was actually my favorite, my newest favorite as far as his books. Like, if I had to rank all them, I would say this is my number one. Hellfall With You is number 2, and then The Spirit Bears His Teeth is number 3. This is definitely my newest favorite. And no, it's not just because of the fact that this cover is also mostly green, okay? It's not that kind of bias, but this was just really well written. I really connected with Miles as a character. Also, Miles is also in the aromantic spectrum as well. See, trans, autistic, and aromantic, ciao. Also, the words queer platonic relationship was used in this book. Do y'all understand how hyped I am that even the words queer platonic relationship in being a young adult novel? And it's not just like a thing, like a pass off line either. It's like actually meant to be like representative of, like, it's a whole thing. And I just love it. Okay, I just love this book so much. Like, also a favorite of the month because yes, truly yes, just read this book if you have not read it already. Now, last but not least, it is the lowest rated book. Granted, Rakesfall was not rated, but this one actually was rated, and it is the lowest rated book of the month. But it wasn't even a bad book. It was just a really good book. And that was Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I read this one via audio. This is an adult, queer, literary sci-fi horror where we're pretty much getting, like, it is dual narrated, where we follow Miri and Leah, I think. Leah is a marine biologist or something? I don't know, she's something about the ocean or something like that. She goes on an expedition, gone on the water, she's been gone for 6 months, she returns, and weird things are happening to her body, and then her wife Miri is like having like this, she's just been experiencing this sense of like grief of her wife, that sure, she's grateful that her wife is alive, but then she realizes that this is not quite her wife. And so it's this sense of this, it's a very unique perspective on grief that I'm not really used to reading when I read books featuring grief or even about grief. Like the sense of loss, even though the person is not dead. They're right there in front of you, and yet you feel this loss. I have to say, this was definitely the strongest part of the novel for me, and I really enjoyed it for that part, for sure. But I rated this one 3.75 stars. I didn't particularly love all the bits regarding, like, what was going on in this weird underwater things, this confinement that Lee was experiencing. I didn't find that to be the most horrifying thing, even though it was horrifying, don't get me wrong, in and of itself, logically, that is pretty horrifying. But that's not the kind of horror that really worked for me. I just really was more interested in connecting more with, like, the grief that Mir was experiencing. So I felt a little bit of disconnect with me and Leah as, like, the reader and the character. But I still recognize, though, is that this is a really, really good book, and I do recommend this. So Kind of Still for sure is grief, confinement. There is also death of parent, death, suicide, sexual content, lesbophobia, also terminal illness, which led to the death of parent, and body horror as well, which I also really like. I do love me some body horror. But yeah, it was really good. And now I'm actually really curious now to read Private Rights by the same author that's coming out in December. So very much curious to read that one, since that's like a queer King Lear retelling. So yeah, I actually liked Julia Armfield's writing here, so I'm looking forward to her newest book. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all the books that I read in September. But if y'all look as far as the number of books I've read, but also like any books fitting for my calling, 5 out of the 6 books I read only fit for the calling. So that leaves you like, well, then I'm 1 book short. And I thankfully was gifted some points from a member in the Discord for Aurelium. They give me some of their points so that I can purchase a scroll of closure for one of the books that I end up DNFing. And again, it will be in my Q3 DNF wrap-up for that book, but I did manage to fulfill my calling for the autumn equinox. I just couldn't push myself through to finishing that book, unfortunately. But especially when, like, y'all could tell with, like, the books I read this month, it was just really, really good. Why on earth would I want to read a book that's, like, below average? I'm not trying to do that to myself. But you know what? It's fine. It truly is fine. But anyways, that is it, y'all. That's all I have for y'all. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe if you want to. Comment down below. How was your reading through September? Did you have a good reading month? Was this a bad reading month? Was this just like a mid? I don't know. And also, if you participate in the Magical Readathon, let me know as well. How did you all do in your calling or callings if you did more than one? I don't know. Let's chat about it in the comments down below. And if you made it this far into the video and you don't have much else to say, but you want to leave me an emoji, leave me some sort of autumnal leaf emoji and like some sort of book emoji. It could be a book stag, singular book, and then a leaf or leaves. Any of those emojis will work for me. Anyways, thank you all for coming on to my video, and I hope to see you all in my next one. Bye.